a Motorsport Podcast Network production. Hey everybody, welcome along. This is another week. This is the V8 Sleuth Podcast for Autobarn, celebrating 40 years of delivering you top gear at low prices. Shop in-store or online today at autobarn.com.au. Now, we love the support the Sleuth faithful give us, and before we get into this episode, there's now a way that you can become a bigger part of our family via V8 Sleuth Podcast Plus. Ad-free episodes, bonus extra eps are the main features. Get on board now. v8sleuth.supportingcast.fm. The link is in the show notes with the details on how you can join up and enjoy those benefits. Now, my guest on the pod this week is a guy who, when you stop and look back on his racing career, achieved a lot in a relatively short space of time. Cameron McLean was the king of the independents and the privateers in Super Tourers and then in V8 Supercars. He's a boy from Brisbane who drove for Dick Johnson, Stone Brothers, Kmart, Gary Rogers, Ford Performance Racing, not to mention his own team as well. That's a pretty handy list of teams that trusted him and signed him up to drive for them. Now, this two-part pod has pretty much it all. How the Greenfield Mowers relationship that he was so connected with over the years began. How it all fell apart too, with a court injunction and a race car being taken from the track mid-weekend. The near misses at Bathurst, racing some amazing Super Tours with BMWs and Volvos and, yes, even an Opel Vectra. The Ford Tickford Racing V8 Supercar seat he signed a deal for and never got to fill. The beginning and end of Paragon Motorsport and so much more. If you're a fan of racing from the 90s and the early 2000s, this is a nice trip down memory lane with one of the great guys of Australian motorsport. It was magnificent to catch up with Cam, so sit back, relax and enjoy this episode of the V8 Sleuth Podcast for Autobarn with Cameron McLean. Cameron McLean, welcome to the V8 Sleuth Podcast. This has been talked about between you and I for probably 2 or 3 years now, but I'm glad we've been able to put it together. Welcome along. Firstly, for our listeners who are tuning in, they're used to seeing you driving yellow race cars over the years, and that's where their memory banks are. But what are you doing now? What's filling up your world?
I'm living a bit of a quieter life out here in Sanford Valley. I'm with my wife Gina. We've got my daughter Georgia. She's had a little baby Elsie 2 years ago that turned me into a grandfather, and she's got another one on the way, which is due actually on Bathurst Sunday. Would you believe? So,
oh no,
we're not sure what gender it is. We can either call it Peter with an ER or Peter with an A. I don't mind either way, you know. So, and the little twin Cams, Connor and Brady, they've grown up and got houses and partners and moving on with their life. And yeah, we're living in a pretty good spot right now, and we're really quite happy. Doing a bit of work on some cars and some sheds in my shed in the yard here for some old customers and people I know, selective clientele. So yeah, passing the days away quite nicely now.
It sounds like it's going well. So what happened to McLean Motors that we were so used to seeing on the side of some of the cars over time? There was a big change with the business there some time ago, wasn't there?
Yeah, I always wanted a bit of a get-out plan. I always thought Dad owned it for a long time. My brother and I bought it off him when my daughter was born in '94. And we parted ways amicably. He wanted to move up the North Coast, so he left after about 2 or 3 years. And I rang Dad one day. I said, I'm looking at selling the business when I'm 50. I hope you don't mind because it's been a family business for a long time. And he said, no, mate. He said, that's all good because I don't know if you realise I only owned it for 9 years and you owned it for 26. I went, oh, okay, so doesn't make me feel so bad. So over a 5-year period, we turned it from McLean Motors into Tyre Power Everton Hills, which made it a sellable thing. A company bought off us. We bought another couple of tyre power businesses, and that was a learning experience owning a tyre business, I can tell you, but very different to what we used to do. But it gave me an out, and it's got a good business there for the people at Everton Hills who can, use it, and it pays the rent, and everyone's happy. So, and I'm not there anymore. So I was 2 years out. Yeah, absolutely. My son, went on that. My son down here, Connor, he worked for me for 7 or 8 years doing an apprenticeship, and he's looking. I still have the business, the name, and everything. He's looking at starting it up somewhere in the north side of Brisbane relatively soon. So we haven't closed it. It still lives on in a small way, and it might have a rebirth in the not too distant future.
We're picking up scoops, and we're only a couple of minutes into the podcast here.
Yeah,
so imagine how we're going to go over the course of the next hour or so. But I mean, you really burst onto our radar as racing fans nationally with that little ex-Tony Longhurst BMW M3 in Sports Sedans. But racing for you had started quite a bit before that. Was it karts as a kid? Was it motorbikes? What was it that got you hooked? Or was it, whose fault is it here? Is it John, your dad? Is he the one to blame for all of this? Your mum, your brother? Who was the one that dragged you in all of this?
Well, he has got a lot to be blamed for, but a lot of it's good too, So we were living out here at Cedar Creek, 10 acres, and we had dirt roads and whatnot in front of us, and we had motorbikes and tractors and all the stuff you grew up with out there. And I used to do some fearful damage to myself on the motorbikes. My brother was quite good. He raced for Kawasaki and Yamaha in the day, and in the end, my old man got sick of putting the bikes back together and bolting me back together. So he went and got a go-kart and said, try that. You're closer to the ground. You don't fall out of it as hard, and see how you go. So we moved out to Sanford Golden Valley Kart Club, raced a bit there. When I was probably grade 10, Brisbane titles, Rana titles, and actually worked out we didn't go too bad. We got a few awards, which are all down at shed. I found a box of stuff I didn't know I owned. After about 20 years, my mother wrapped up in 1991 newspaper the trophies from when I was in 1988 when I was racing the go-kart. So we've still got a bit of that stuff down there. But yeah, that, and then we moved. Got a driver's license, moved into the Fiat Car Club and started there, which Mum and Dad were foundation members of. And they rallied Fiats and Lancias for years, from Yeppoon to Gosford, Queensland Championship. Had a bit of a run in the National Championship, Australian Rally Championship when it was up here in Brisbane and whatnot. And Mum could hold her own with the men in the cars. She knows it all. They used to do things called the powder puff rallies, which was the ladies, the wives, I guess, which is all politically incorrect now. But the ladies would get in the cars, the men would navigate, have a few beers, do what they do. And Mum and Cherie Shannon, they used to run around and win a few of those rallies. So Mum could drive, Dad could drive, we could all drive. It was a bit of a lifestyle, really. And, we loved it. We had Brock Commodores and all sorts of things at HDT days. That's a mouthful now, isn't it? Holden Dealer Team days. And, it was just a family thing. We just went racing together, the whole crew.
And it's something that when you went racing later on and it all stepped up, it stayed very much that family situation. I mean, the Sports Sedans, the Super Tourers, your dad was the team manager, your brother was involved.
Yep.
It really was that era where you could go racing as a family at a pretty high level as you ended up at running that stuff. I guess you look back on that as that's the way you'd love to have done it, because it's part of that story more than just the motor racing. It's a family story too. Yeah,
we just as we went year on year, we got a better car. Like my daughter was at the racetrack when she was 6 weeks old. So I think my wife Gina made up a little Greenfield Mowers racing shirt, and when we had the M3 there, she was 6 years old with cotton wool buds in her ears at Lakeside. And George's even and the boys. We have a little Commodore dirt track car we take out to Ipswich West Morton Auto Club at Willowbank, the dirt track, and all the kids have driven it. They all drive around. They want to go back out in it. Like my daughter says, Dad, it's just an emotional roller coaster. I don't know how you do it. You're going really good 1 minute, then you're backwards off the track in fourth gear. She tries hard. She goes well. She's fearless. But and the boys, Connor's quite quick, and Brady loves it. But so still as a family, we're still going racing 20 years after that initial time. But it was, you're right, it's the sandwich makers, truck drivers, mechanics, sticker guys, wash the clothes, repair the car, and it was all in-house with our crew. We did it all together as one unit, and it was really good times, so I can't complain about it. I loved it all.
Take me back to that, the BMW, the M3. It was an ex-Tony Longhurst car after the end of Group A. The V8 formula had come in, so it was kind of redundant to use for Tony and his team, who moved into 2-litre cars. But what was the pathway? How did you come and your dad and your family come to connect and end up with you driving that car?
Yeah, it came from two angles, that getting that car. One was a guy called Peter Jones, who is Harry Jones' old man. I'm sure it's always a bit hard for the father when you become the famous son's old man, isn't it? But anyway, sorry, Peter. But Peter had I think it was a Formula 2 car at Lakeside one day, and we were pitted beside him, and he had trouble with the motor and whatnot. And Dad went and had a look at it for him and said, he just got the motor done anyway. Someone didn't clean the oil cooler out. We found out it was wrong, and we ended up fixing that car for him. Became quite friendly with Peter. and he was friends with Tony Longhurst's old man. So after we then ran, I had a Fiat 1500 race car which had about 140 horsepower, and it was the fastest thing I've ever had in my life, you know. And Peter bought a Alfa Romeo turbocharged Alfa Romeo GT Sports Sedan, which I think was an old Pi Peter Werrett rally car in one form, and went up to this car. We rebuilt it for Peter, and we went to the track with the Fiat and the Alfa. And I drove the Fiat around, and then Peter drove the Alfa, and he went, "Holy shit, that thing is a missile that's going to kill you." I said, "I'll have a drive and make sure it's okay." So I drove the Alfa, and he drove the Fiat. He liked the Fiat, and I loved the Alfa. You know, it had 550 on boost or whatever it had, and we ended up prepping Peter's cars and all that, so we became quite friendly. And then on the other side, there was the Greenfield Mowers side that came through the Fiat Car Club relationship. We were fixing their Fiats. They had little Lewis Reinhold and Theo Reinhold had Fiats, and they ended up having Porsches and Ferraris and Mercedes, a lot of cars. We ended up fixing all their cars because Enzo Ferrari made a quote one day that any competent Fiat mechanic can fix any one of my cars. And Dad was probably one of the better Fiat mechanics in Brisbane back in the day, and we worked for him. We ended up fixing all of their cars, becoming quite friendly with them. So with a bit of help from Greenfield Mowers and the connection through Peter Jones and the Longhurst, it came up to Tony was selling that BMW E30, and Dad and Lewis and Peter Jones did a bit of a deal, and we ended up with this absolute hot rod parked in our shed. It was, you know, we couldn't believe how lucky I was. Peter and I shared the driving and towed it around the country and went to Lakeside together a heap of times, and then we got that car, and the rest it all really started from getting that E30 BMW from Tony, you know.
Well, it really sort of did something that hadn't been done before, in that you won the Australian Sports Sedan Championship. I think it was the first and probably the only time a four-cylinder, normally aspirated non-turbo car had won it. And if you remember, at the time there was a bit of a civil war going on with sports sedan racing, and there was Thunder Sports. It was kind of all the same stuff, but split between different lines. But you kind of just went and ran wherever, whatever, however, and you ended up winning a national championship. But what did you do to that car to make it as competitive as you could? Because you weren't stuck to the Group A rules. You could do all sorts of things to that to try to make it a little bit faster.
Well, we actually did nothing. We decided one day we should pull it apart and check the rod ends and do the stuff. So Peter and I went to the shed, and because he sort of wasn't mechanical at all, but he liked the idea of being mechanical. And with my help, we pulled it apart and put it all back together. And we actually put it back exactly how it was when we got it from Tony. We didn't change it all. I think from Group A rules, it had a carbon fibre bonnet, plastic glass, which was all DTM spec. They were allowed to run in Germany, which they weren't allowed to run over here. I think there was no dash in it, but all that stuff came with it. It might have been 100 kilos lighter or something. And when we won that national championship, because of the Thunder Sports and the Sports Sedan war, there was only a one race championship the Thunder Sports race was a one race we won. It was raining at Phillip Island, went to Thunder Sports, and we actually won that by the length of the straight, I think, because all those big V8s with everyone had 10-year-old rock hard wets by then, and we actually had a set that were relatively new from Tony, probably a couple of years old, and bolted on. And so we were lucky enough to win a Thunder Sports race, and then we went to Sandown 500 in front of the big boys, and we ran in the wet at Sandown in the Sports Sedan race, which was part of the Australian Championship, I think, back then. And Brian Smith was running the Alfetta GDV from Riccadello's over in Perth, which has won everything forever. I think it's still winning stuff, isn't it? And we had a great roast in. It was a lot better. He passed me down the front straight. I passed him into the corner. Down the back straight, he passed me. And eventually we sort of wore him down. And the little BMW, as they always were, just too strong and too consistent, and didn't put a wheel wrong. And that was in front of, I remember seeing after we came across the line, you could see all the, I really didn't even know who these people were, but there's all the Red from the Winfield, the Dick Johnson, all those, and Longhurst, all those guys were actually watching one of the old touring cars do what it should do, is be winning, So it was pretty good moment. That was probably as high as I'd ever thought I'd get in motorsport. It was fantastic.
So you weren't really thinking that this could be a career, a full-time profession. This was fun, in essence, for you.
Yeah, like we never, you see now it's karts to your 12, it's Formula Fords from there, it's Formula Vs, then it's Formula 2s, then it's Carrera Cup, and then Super 2s and V8s. Not at all. We were just doing it. We were just doing it because we liked doing it, and it was still a hobby. We had no spare parts for that car, that BMW. We put it in the truck. We had 20-litre jerry cans painted yellow from the Greenfield Mowers shop, the same colour as their mowers, and I might have had a set of wets and 2 spare slicks, and that was about it. They were all the second-hand tyres we got from when we got the car from Tony. It was all the used-up touring car stuff that he kept. We got, and so there was no new tyres or anything. And we were just doing it on no budget at all. It was just the same deal. We made the sandwiches with dairy. We prepped the car, fueled it. We pitted. I remember we were pitting in the rain at Phillip Island. We were down the back in the mud, and you couldn't get the cars out. They were getting bogged in the paddock. So we just parked behind one of the V8 trucks at Phillip Island, and we were just on the bitumen in the rain, changing wheels and tyres and standing around waiting for the race to start. It was all, didn't even have a tent, So it had a pretty cool car.
Yes. It's all about the car. That's the
Absolutely.
really important thing. That's a really important thing. So from that BMW M3 came these ladder moments where you just stepped up to Super Touring, and then every year you got a better car and a faster car. So let's start with why Super Touring? Because it was growing, it was accessible. I guess Greenfield Mowers could afford it. What was the situation with going 2-litre racing?
Well, I think the V8 cars weren't as easy to get, and Greenfield weren't that keen on the V8 stuff, and we'd sort of grown up with the European cars, and they were more European car oriented. Loved the BMWs, and mate, we were, when someone says to you, "Do you want to go Super Touring racing in a BMW, ex-Longhurst BMW again, or Ellery Longhurst BMW?" You jump at it. Of course you do. And we never really talked about the V8s, and whether we should have or not, who knows now. But I can't complain about anything we did. But we did a whole season in '96. It was the ex-Ellery car, which was the ex-Longhurst car from Winton, where he, I don't know why Tony did that, but he jumped down and decided to punch Paul Morris in the helmet 10 times. So he should have waited till he got out of the car and taken his helmet off. But anyway, so we got that car, and we had a mixed year. I think we were probably on the big stage trying a bit hard a few times and did a bit of damage to it. But you live and learn, You just got to have a go, haven't you? You don't want to die wondering.
Was the situation, Cam, that Greenfield would buy the cars and it was your job and your dad and your brothers to run the car? Was that kind of how it loosely worked?
Absolutely. That's exactly how it worked. They would fund the car. We had the truck and would fuel it and repair it and maintain it. And at the end of the year, they would own it and sell it on. That went on till 2001. But, yeah, they definitely bought them. And they were always their cars and the spares. We had a spare engine that was usually theirs as well, and unless we pieced something together. But we certainly didn't have the loot to be buying Super Tourers from other countries and things like that,
So the car, you started actually, a lot of people might not remember that in '96 we remember you in Super Tourers I think they were they independents, I think, in Super Tourers? Privateers, same thing.
Independent Cup, yeah.
That's right. But you actually started in late 95 because there was the Grand Prix in Adelaide and the Brock Classic at Calder. A lot of people will forget that there was a Super Touring support event there, and I think it had 8 cars or something like that. It wasn't very flash, but you got your eye in a couple of times before the full season in '96, though.
Yeah, you're right. I actually forgot about that too. We raced 85 at the Adelaide Grand Prix, and I remember I knew Tony Scott quite well because he owned a service station down the road from our mechanic shop, and the one car I managed to crash into all weekend was a Volvo station wagon that he was driving. So I won't forget that. He reminds me about it. So I think I went backwards into the side of him in the hairpin. But anyway, you're right. I forgot about that too. I tried to maybe. But yeah, we did that, and then we did the Brock Classic at Calder, which was, I'd never been to Calder. I've been to Adelaide. I raced an old Fiat there in Adelaide in 80. I don't know what it was. Must have been 87 or something or other on the long, way back then. But so we did a couple of rounds, and then we moved into, I can't remember the first round. We did a night race at Oran Park in that car, I remember, in '96, and for Lakeside and Phillip Island, a few of the great tracks we'd never been to. It was fantastic,
So for '97, a bit of a shock horror, no BMW for you for the next year, but you went and got an Opel Vectra, front-wheel drive. It came from South Africa, actually, but am I right in remembering that this car, let's put it this way, didn't come alone, it came with something of a passenger when it arrived in Australia?
Yeah, it was a bit of a thing. South Africa, it's the Wild West, isn't it? I don't know, but it got to customs and quarantine, and they rang us, said, you've got to come over and pull the radiator out and clean the radiator out. It was a big summer dance about. There was grass seed in the radiator because Briggsy must have been off the track somewhere in at the last race, and so I think Dave Homer went over and the old man, they went and got the car, pulled it apart, cleaned the radiator out. Whether they just left the radiator with them, I'm not sure. But that was days and days of mucking around. And then we got the car back and everything was packed inside it. And we're pulling the boxes out, the radiators, the spare brake pads and bits and pieces. And my brother Jason just goes, oh my God, what is that? And there was this furry little crocodile-looking dead thing lying under one of the brake disc boxes, and it was squashed in the back floor. So the quarantine guys didn't get that. So we got a pair of multi-grips, lit a fire in a drum, took it out the back and cremated it to try and keep all the nasties out of Australia. So we did the right thing, but we had a bit of grass seed they were terrified about, and then there was a dead marsupial in the back that they didn't notice. So
small detail.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
I have actually a bit of a postscript to the Vectra. I think it was earlier this year or late last year. My memory's a bit fuzzy. That car re-emerged in the UK, put back to its South African race livery that Mike Briggs had driven it as an Opel factory car in South Africa. So it's still around, that car, but I just have a memory for you that thing must have just chewed tyres. It just didn't seem like the sort of car that was going to, get you closer to the factory cars.
No, they were good in a straight line. It was pretty quick in a straight line, but you couldn't turn it. It had the worst feature that car had was a sequential column change.
Oh, I remember. Yeah.
So if you went into a corner, you wanted to go into a hairpin and you're about to brake and turn it, you had to move your hands from 10 and 2 on the steering wheel to like 12 and 6. So when you turned in, you could change the gear up on the way out. Your hands are in the right spot to change gears. So you had to pre-plan everything in it. It just ripped. The front geometry was all wrong, and the gearbox and engine were bolted to the chassis rails, and you couldn't move into the arms to get the roll centre right. And we tried, and we got it better without knowledge that we had. And Dave Farron and Murray Coote helped us out a lot with that, and the car was not too bad at the end, but it still wasn't up to like a factory BMW or Audi or Volvo with all the money they spent, So, but we did what we could with it, and we still had a good time, mate. We're still charging on forward. We were getting further up the chain than we ever thought we would. So I'm not sure if we won the Independence Cup in that or not. I can't remember now. I think we did. I'm not sure now that year.
You did win more often than not in independents or privateers, no matter which category you were in. But so we've gone from the Sports Sedan BMW, wow, we're running an old Bathurst car, that's cool, to a step in a Super Touring. Then we've stepped to the Vectra. There's got to be another step here, and you end up for 98. And this is one I'm really excited to talk to you about, because I've never stopped to actually talk to you about this stuff. But the factory BMW team disbands. All these cars are available. You get your hands on the reigning championship-winning Paul Morris car that did cross the line first at Bathurst with he and Craig Baird, but as history shows, and Beardo's been on the pod before, they had that taken off them. But when you got your hands on that car, I'd love to hear how that all came to be and why you ended up with that car. But you finally had a car that was capable of winning races outright against the factory teams.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we just approached BMW Motorsport, and we had a bit of a relationship with John Longhurst. I think Tony's old man. Yeah, and the cars came up for sale through BMW Motorsport, and we approached him, and we were lucky enough to get one of the Diet Coke cars, and the same deal. We didn't do a lot to that car during the year. We'd pretty much just maintained it, maybe changed the back spring here and there, had their old setup sheets and bits and pieces, and we just drove it how they drove it. I don't think we quite had the tyres they had a couple of years before. Everyone was more on a similar tyre. The BMWs had I'm sure there's some different tyres in those categories, as we all know back in the day. But we got that car, and we put it on the hoist and had a look at it. It had a carbon fibre tail shaft. Everything was made out of titanium and unobtainium and all these weird metals we've never even seen. And the motor's nearly in the dash. In the dash, we had the gimbal brake thing that would take pressure off the inside brake and load up the outside one. All this sort of stuff. You had to relearn to drive that car again, and it was really good. It was probably better on the tyres than the front wheel drive cars and the Audis, but you could also damage the rear tyres if you drove it properly. They had the formula pretty right with those cars, with the width and compounds of the tyres, where it made the racing really good, And we did run. I got boxes of trophies down there from podium finishes and bits and pieces in that 98 year. But there's probably two races we could have won that year. I think was Oran Park. Well, Oran Park, we led that race, and I ran out of back tyres, and Brad actually went side by side over the flip flops at Oran Park. That was a pretty exciting moment in life when you're on the outside there. Brad was good, we had a bit of rubbing, but there was no pushing, so. And he ended up beating me there. We led most of that race, and probably the one at Lakeside we should have won. But I think Toka, who's two-litre organisation, whatever it was called back then, had different ideas, getting money from Volvo and Audi. This is only my humble opinion. But we got a yellow flag for passing Cameron McConville, black flag for passing Cameron McConville into Hungary. The flag was there, but it came out as we approached, so. We got a drive through and we ended up third in that race. That's when McConville took out Jim, and there was a bit of a punch up at the end and all that sort of stuff. It was quite pretty good. And then Eastern Creek was another one where there was a Peugeot that ran off the track that was probably parked near Parramatta, I think, and they pulled the safety car out, and we're a fairway ahead. We would have won that race, and then Jimmy just had better tyres and he just outraced me. Really, he's a hard man to outrace, Jim Richards, and he just got the better of me, and we came second in that race, but. Without those two, without the safety car and that drive-through penalty, we probably could have won those two races, and we didn't. That's history of the way it is, and it sounds like sour grapes, but it's not. But you just, you wake up thinking, still wake up in the middle of the night thinking about things, and those two races are one of them.
Because would that have been kind of if you got one of those over the line, let alone two of them, would that have been, if you look back on it now, a career highlight? I mean, you had a lot of podiums and a lot of great results in V8s and a lot of really good stuff at Bathurst, but to beat two factory Audis in Brad, who was the champion that year, and Cam McConville, who was a race winner, Jim Richards in the factory Volvo. I mean, Jim, we don't need to introduce Jim Richards.
No.
I know it wasn't a big field and there wasn't like hordes of factory cars, but for the little Queensland privateer team to win a race or two against some of those operators, that must stand as the thing that that's got to irk you more than anything in your career, surely.
The Lakeside one's the one that hurts me because we went there for was to win. We never went there to make up the numbers or come second or come third. Or who cares really? It's nice. It's nice when you look back, but you just want that big number one, that top step. But we definitely could have beaten O'Meara in that second race at Lakeside. We weren't good in the first race, but we were good in the second race, and we got a penalty, which is, whether it was right or wrong, we think it's wrong, but other people think it's right. And that's probably the one that hurts the most because, Queensland's, I can really see it from here. It's 15 minutes from my house, 20 minutes from my house, and I grew up driving go-karts and Fiats and Alphas and whatever, anything I could get my hands on around there, and Geminis, HQs, EHs, whatever. And to win there in front of all my friends and family and everyone supported us for so long to get us there would have been absolutely fantastic. And we came second, and it was really quite deflating, actually. Yeah, it does irk me, you're right.
Yeah, I hate to open the old wounds.
Yeah, I've nearly forgotten about it, thank you.
Oh, sorry to bring it back up. Sorry to bring it up. Let's move along. Yep. You mentioned Tony Scott before and clanging into the Volvo wagon at the Adelaide Grand Prix. He ends up with you a couple of times over your motor racing journey, and Bathurst that year, you guys ran your own car as a privateer up against the visiting, Volvo, Nissan, Vauxhall 888 teams. That's a cool thing to look back on, that you and your family ran a car in the Bathurst 1000, taking on, at the time, some of the best touring car teams from around the world. That's pretty cool.
Oh, absolutely. We've all been watching the British touring cars and see what they do to each other. It was kill or be killed over there, So, to be on the same grid as them and race against them. Then as we rolled out, we found out we're competitive with them. We took a pretty reserved approach with the practice and qualifying, and we didn't. If we tore a corner off the back of that BMW, that probably would have been it for the day, because the TAFE team would have fixed it. If you crash a car at Bathurst on Friday, it's never the same on Sunday, is it? Very rarely they come back. And we'd learnt that even by watching TV, But, we went there. We made it to the shootout. Tony was really good. He's fit. He's a little bit older than me, not much, I don't think. But Now, it's funny, he plays tennis, he does marathons, he does this stuff, and I didn't do any fitness or anything. We just worked on cars and built the BMWs, did the stuff. And that BMW actually had no power steering for whatever reason. It was quite heavy to drive, you know, it's just that's the way it was. And Tony did his stint at BMW at Bathurst. I think he did his second stint, and I opened the door waiting for him to jump out of the car, and he's just looking at me. He couldn't get out. He was that buggered, so I grabbed him by the little lapel things or under the arms. I dragged him out and threw him on the ground, stepped over him and got in the car, and he crawled back into the car. And I think that was the last thing he did for the day. And we were lucky that day too. We had I literally was pulling, I think, fourth gear down Conrod out of the elbow, and the Kangaroo, you see him always on TV now, but I ran over its tail. I didn't hit it, didn't do anything, but I remember hitting the dun-dun as it ran over its tail as it sort of hit the...
I remember that, yeah.
It was so close to, you know, would have torn the left-hand front corner off it, and on the last lap of that race, the car started to have a bit of a flutter down Conrod, and it wasn't running right, and rolled through to the end. And when we got there, I remember they had a carbon fibre tapper cover, BMW Motorsport and everything all on the top of them, and that was all blown to pieces. It actually lunched the motor, just rolling into the chase, which probably not many people know about, but we've got photos of under the engine bay, all the bonnets covered in oil under the bonnet, and so it wouldn't have done another lap, that car.
Lucky, very lucky.
Yep, I'll take that.
Yeah, I think you guys finished fourth or fifth that day. Like, you weren't far away from the podium.
Well, it was fourth, and we were the first privateer, which was supposed to get on the podium and get an award, but we weren't allowed up there either. So we just, I think we just ripped the top off a few crownies and had a celebratory beer because we got there at the end. So it was good.
Yeah, absolutely. And you got to go back to Bathurst a month or so later, because that was the first year that you got an opportunity in a V8 supercar with Gary Rogers, sharing with a young rookie bloke called Garth Tander. Right. Had there been some V8 sniffing coming to you in the previous years, and that was the first one that landed? How had that all come to be for you to be a V8 driver? Yeah,
there was one quite a long time ago. I can't think of the guy's name now. It's familiar. Bob Tyndall, I think, who was at
Alcare Air Conditioning. Yep.
I took to them when we were racing with the Alpha Sports Sedan, which was probably in about the late 80s, about driving that VL Commodore. And I know how fast I was when I was 20, and I didn't drive a touring car till I was 31. I know how not fast I was then compared to when I was 20, but I talked to, and nothing came of that. I didn't know how it worked, didn't know whether it needed money. I had no idea. I didn't know how to get to Sydney then, you know. So we just, that didn't happen. That was the only person I talked about driving a V8 before that. And then Gary Rogers through the Super Touring tyres, because obviously he ran Stephen Richards in the Nissans and Alphas and stuff back in the day. Gary gave us a ring and see if I wanted to go down and have a drive at Whitten with, and I turn up and there's Jim and Garth Tander and Bargwana and two VS Commodores. I think one was a HRT car and one was a Gibson car from memory, and never really driven one before, and drove those things around Whitten and went, holy shit, this thing is out of control. But once you got your head around it and realise how you got to drive them, stop them, turn them, squirt them off the corner, and drive them a lot different to the Super Tourers, which was all mid-corner speed, you know. We didn't go too bad, and we got to Sandown, and we were going all right. I can't remember where we qualified, but I think we were running in the top 10. I hadn't driven yet. Garth started the race in the rain. I drove with Garth Tander, and next thing I'm watching on TV, and I see the thing going backwards into Dandenong Road and bouncing off the tyres and the fence and everything. So, packed the helmet bag up and watched the rest of the race from there. Didn't get in the car that day, and then we went to Bathurst, and I think he was running fourth in maybe lap 15 or 20, somewhere in the first stint, and tried to pass Larry down into the inside, into the elbow, and belted him with the front wheel in the door. I think Larry continued on all right, but it broke our power steering, and I had a bit of a drive around with no power steer, and the car was all taped up, and I think I was pretty down about that, and I just said to him on the road, I said, mate, this car is beeped. I'm bringing it in. You can't drive it anymore. I've had enough. You couldn't hang on to it. I was just going to crash it, you know. And we were only on lap 30, so we had a long way to go.
Yeah.
And that was a bit of a sad start to the V8 career there, but pressed on and didn't give up and keep moving forward.
Well, you moved forward so much that you ended up with a V8 yourself. So For the following year, you and the Greenfield guys got your hands on one of DJR's EL Falcons. They were going to the new AUs. What prompted the decision to go to V8 Supercars? Had you kind of tapped it out with Super Tourers? What was the reasoning behind the move, given what you said about the Greenfield guys liking the BMWs and the European cars? This was very much a big shift.
Yeah, it was a bit of a hard sell for Greenfield to move into something that was formerly an Australian taxi, you know, and to move into a V8. But I think we got a taste of the V8s with Gary Rogers and the whole. Yeah, that was on my own merit. We didn't pay for that drive, and Greenfield weren't involved, but they saw it, smelt it, lived it, and I think we're happy to move over. Super Touring was sort of dying off. We talked about GT production, a few things like that, because we still were undecided, and the Greenfield guys had a relationship with Palmer Tube Mills. I think they were buying steel for their mowers and bits and pieces, something like that from them. And Dick was beside Palmer, obviously, because he's been a long time supporter of Dick's, and we got the connection there, and when that look, and pretty much, I didn't have too much to do with the deal, but Greenfield was buying the car, Dad was involved in running it, and next thing you know, we're at Lakeside doing a handover with Dick, taking photos with a true Queensland legend, and getting our hands on an EL Falcon that was a pretty good bit of kit. The only problem with that car was run on Dunlop tyres its whole life, and we had to move on to the Bridgestone tyres, which obviously were way different because everyone struggled who used to run Dunlops or Yokeys when they went to Bridgestone for the first few bits of the first part of the season, you know. But so it came through still through people we knew yesteryear, you know, and it was good. It was a good thing.
Were you a Johnson fan as a kid? Was this kind of a bit of a, you know, you're a Brisbane boy, he's a Brisbane boy, he's, you know, massive in Queensland through the 80s and into the 90s. Was this kind of a, am I really here? Is this a bit weird sort of a moment?
Well, don't tell Dick, but I was more of a Peter Brock fan back in the day. But the more, and I got to deal with Dick a fair bit over the next probably decade, really, or you know, next few years, and the more I dealt with him, the more a fan I became, you know, and we, he did everything he said was right, it was true. He never did anything. What he said he did, and that was how Dick was, and what we got with that car is exactly what we said. You know, we leased motors of him for that next year, and you know, we did quite a bit of dealing with him. You know, it was good. It was pretty. Like I said before, you know, every step we took, like all of a sudden now we owned our own V8 supercar. Like that was never going to happen, you know, and all of a sudden it has happened. So we didn't know what to do. We put on the hoist beside. We still had the 98 BMW and 98 BMW, and we had two hoists at the back of the workshop, and we put the Dick's Falcon on there, our Falcon now, and our BMW. And my brother walked under the car and went, "What? Are you going to race that thing? Have a look at it. Like it's all big and heavy, and you know, compared to the nimble little BMW, but it did a job. It was the best thing we ever did, straight to Adelaide in '99."
And it was such a great time where, you know, V8 Supercars was on the up. The grid sizes were packed. Adelaide 500 comes onto the calendar that year. You know, Bathurst is booming. Channel 10 coverage. It was financially very, very viable for a privateer team like yours, you know, albeit at the top of the privateer tree rather than some of the others who were a bit further down, to actually make a fist of it.
Yeah, that was still a time like when you went to Adelaide. Mark Poole turned up in the John Deere car and only turned up at a few races. I'd done Melbourne and Adelaide, you know, and you go to Darwin and there's a couple of guys that have built a supercar up there, you know, and they don't go to every round. So it was not a franchise thing back then. And the first race we went to was Eastern Creek, and I think we broke a lifter in one of the motor, and we didn't actually qualify. And we're outside the 32, so I think 42 cars.
It was 40 cars, yeah. So how did you get your way into the field, Cameron? There's a story here, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it was Morky, oi, Richard Mork, qualified last, and we went and saw him and said, "Mate, what are we got to do to get you to probably not start the first race?" He said, "Well, I'd really like a new front splitter for my VS, and mate, there'll be one at your front door on Monday morning." You know, I think we went down to whoever we got it off, and he claimed he had a technical issue with his car, and we slipped onto last in the grid, and we started our first V8 supercar race from last. So so we did a bit of a Swifty, and he he was more than happy with his brand new splitter, carbon fibre splitter for his car.
Oh, you're a good fella. Just doing your bit for the Commodore community, aren't you?
Absolutely.
That you and one of the things I think our fans love is some of the stuff that's not part of the championship anymore. But in those days, there was a Saturday afternoon Privateers Cup race where all the privateers had their own. I mean, there'd been a dash and a sprint in previous years, but these were proper sort of 10, 15 lap races on a Saturday that were on trackside on TV in a week or two's time. But I think a lot of people forget that those races were there that year, and you were kind of the dominant guy when all that stuff was rolling out.
Yeah, you're right. Saturday afternoon there was a privateers race, and it was, I think, Romano and Forbes and myself and another gaggle of people. People came and go in that, but mate, it was nothing to be taken lightly. It was, you're in front of the big boys, and they're all watching because they're all looking for co-drivers and the next guy to jump in the seat next year. So you want to be as professional, as fast, as good as you can. So, me and Rodney had a few words and a few touches, and because his old man ended up with the team later on, and we had a proper go. It was really good. It was really good to get the track to yourself, so you could actually have you were almost the big dog in that Saturday race, So we won a few, we broke in a few, we crashed in a few, but we ended up winning enough to become the privateers champion that year, and I think that was the first year into V8, so we were stoked with that, and it was once again, it was more than we ever hoped for.
And you ended up with John Cleland sharing with you at Bathurst. And I mean, he was and he still is, a card-carrying Bathurst fan club member, loves the joint, loves the cars. How did he end up in your car? Because there hadn't, as far as I can remember, been a previous kind of connection with him.
Yeah, no, there wasn't. There was, I can't remember her name now for love or money, our media.
Anne Gigney.
Anne Gigney, yep, absolutely. She did a really good job. I knew it 30 seconds ago, got stage fright. So, but you've got, we drove Mick Malloy around in that Falcon, we drove Ricky Ponting around in that Falcon, did some...
Mick Malloy? What?
Yeah, at Calder. I've never heard him shut up before in my life, and he was quiet for about 2.5 minutes. and we drove them around, and she came up with a proposition about John Cullen. I think maybe she worked at Brad Jones, might be something to do with that.
She had been at Brad's doing the Audi PR previously.
Yeah, and I think she might have known him then, but he came over and he was great. He was great value. He was quick enough, did everything right. He's a professional, ultimate professional car dealer in Scotland, and he did a real good job until about lap 120. I got in the car and drove out of the pits. He jumped out, I jumped in. We're doing the last stint, and I go up Mount Straight and go first, second, third, crunch, 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 grind, wouldn't go in. Fourth gear, it goes away. I got on the radio and said, "What was third gear broken? Was something on third gear?" And what's going on? And he said, "No, it's all good when I left it." I said, "Mate, he's been hanging around Peter Brock too long." But so we had no third gear, so you had to hold it in third gear, up out of the cutting through Reed Park, Solomon Park there, and that was pretty difficult. And then I ended up, unfortunately, parking it on the left-hand side there, out of over the bump there into Solomon Park, under the tree there. And I went, I must have ripped the steering wheel out of my hand because I was holding in third gear and wasn't strong enough. And years and years later, we went down to Peter Behags, who was building all the whole Ford Motorsport stuff, then the uprights and all the bits and pieces. And I looked under his bench and said, "What are all those? They're all uprights." And he said, "Oh, they're all those broken uprights. The early spec we had, because we had a throttle cover break on Thursday at Bathurst, and Bridie had an off and tore the whole left-hand side out of our car, which was all the new gear in that car we put in. So we had to put all the old gear back in. And on lap 138, the steering wheel got torn out of my hand, and I hit the fence. And about 5 years later, I saw the broken uprights at Peter Behags. He said, "I used to pull the top ball joint out of those uprights, and that's what happened. It tore the upright out. I was holding it in third gear with one hand, and it tore the ball joint out of the thing, and I did the wall of death nearly over the top, you see the footage up, and I parked on the side of the road there, and I sat on a tree stump, or sat on my helmet or a tree stump, whatever was there, and I was bloody all devastated. And these two guys turned up on the other side of the track. They were sitting in lounge chairs with a diff housing and a motorbike front on them with an esky in front of the handlebars, and they said, "Do you want a beer, mate?" And I said, "Oh, no, I'm right. They said, "You need something." And they started hurling beer cans over the track to me, and I actually, in the end, and they had a TV, a little TV on the handlebars, and I don't know who they were. I never saw them again. Don't know who they were. And I had one beer because I was that thirsty, and then I thought I better not, because I might have to go to hearing about this. So I don't want to be having a beer. So I end up gave them all to the tow truck driver and said, "Mate, can you look after the things?" It sat on the side of the road for 20 laps, as they did back in the day. They didn't tow them away. But it was a pretty heartbreaking end. We were racing with Dick actually for third and fourth. I think we were close enough to be thereabouts. So if we had beaten Dick at Bathurst in his new AU in his old car, that would have been a pretty special moment. But the thing fell to bits in the end.
It did. That would have been a weird one.
Yeah.
And that's where we'll leave you hanging for a little bit more on the V8 Sleuth podcast for Autobarn. Part 2 of my chat with Cameron includes lots more. The completion of the Paragon chapter of his V8 supercar career, the Bathurst that could have easily resulted in divorce. Okay, well, maybe I'm putting some mayo on that, but could have very easily been a win in his last great race. Lap 1 heartbreak with Kmart Racing, a massive Porsche rollover, and much more. Part 2 isn't far away. In the meantime, check out the rest of our episodes from the archive, and I'll catch you next time with another episode of the V8 Sleuth podcast for Autobarn.